Welcome back to Learn, Lead, Go. This episode is part of our Women Who Lead series, sponsored by Atard Leadership Academy, the podcast where we spotlight bold, brilliant women who are making a lasting impact in their industries and communities. I'm your host, Deneen Atard, and today's guest is someone who brings both power and peace to the world of communication. Joining me is the incredible Kealah Parkinson, aka Coach KiKi, a communication strategist, coach, author, and speaker with more than 25 years of experience in the communications industry and nearly 15 years in private coaching practice. She began her career in journalism, interning at Red Book magazine before stepping into high profile roles as a creative producer, speechwriter, and speech coach for Fortune 500 companies like Abbott Laboratories and Cisco Systems. Coach KiKi is the author of My Moody Day book, which supports healthy emotional expression. In today's episode, we'll explore what it really means to speak your truth and how emotional awareness, brain based techniques, and courageous clarity can change your life and leadership. Coach KiKi, welcome to Women Who Lead.
Hi, Deneen. Thanks for having me on.
Coach KiKi, I am so excited to have you on the show today. It really feels like I'm interviewing a close and dear friend because we've spent a lot of time together.
Yes, virtually especially.
I was going to say virtually because I have been on your radio show, Tune In Radio for Your Mind, Body, and Soul.
That's right, and I love having you back as a guest. Keep coming back, please.
I promise you I will, but it's so great to have it on the flip side where I actually get a chance to ask you questions and get to know more about you. But I want you to share, the reason we're here is we're going to talk about your new book, which is My Moody Day book. But I want you to share with our listeners a little bit about the book, if you will.
Okay, thank you. I'm excited to be on as a guest also and to, like you said, flip the tables here. My Moody Day book is something that just came out in December of 24, so it's brand new if people are catching this right after you and I talk. And it is subtitled A Season of Mood Tools for People with Feelings. And some people have called it a field guide for human feelings because emotional intelligence is everywhere, but what the heck are emotions and why do we have them?
And sometimes they can go haywire. So I think this
sure.
is a much needed resource. When you were writing the book, what was your ultimate goal?
Well, I tell you, I actually started the whole concept of the book a decade ago when a friend of mine who was working at a peer specialist at a mental health facility was tasked with the director of that facility to find a book just like this that they could use to help consumers, inpatients, kind of go through and process a little bit about knowing what the feelings are, why we have them. He compared it at the time to a daily devotional that was used in the rehab facility just for today, which is, I think, by Narcotics Anonymous. And so I was helping them scour the internet and try to find a book like this, and it didn't exist. So I said, I'm just going to have to write it.
I like that train of thought. If it doesn't exist and I know that there's a need there, I will step up and fill that need. Well, of course, you know that my heart is in leadership, and I do believe that a key component of being an effective leader is the ability to manage our emotions, express them correctly, and then also to be able to gauge the emotions of those that we lead. Which is why when you talked to me about your book, I said, oh, my goodness, I need to have her on the show so that we can talk about this. In your book, you emphasize the importance of naming emotions. This practice helps leaders better understand and navigate their feelings in everyday work environment because we know that it's stressful. If you're a salesperson, someone's always in your face talking about numbers. If you are leading a team of engineers or whatever your profession is, there's always stress because there's always the human aspect of interacting with one another. And how can your book and those practices about naming the emotions help leaders be better equipped?
First of all, I love that question because I said, I was writing it because someone wanted it in a mental health facility, but these emotional experiences that we have, that's human. I think that on the far extreme of it is when we're ignoring our feelings to our detriment, where we develop mental illness, right? We don't have to have that far and that pronounced of an experience to say, I still don't understand feelings and they're scary and they maybe get me in trouble in the workplace, or I have been accused of not being emotional enough, perhaps, right? So as team leaders, as salespeople, as business owners even, or C-suite execs, like there's that component of emotional intelligence. And I kind of want to answer your question with a question and just remind your listeners that, we've got those moments where we're in those high-pressure situations, maybe sales are riding on the line, and we go into fight or flight. And so we get to a place where we just kind of stop communicating. Like we just can't access the words that we want to say, and we don't even know what we're feeling because there's so much pressure on us. And fight or flight from a survival standpoint is imperative. When it comes to like I'm about to be attacked and I need to make only one of two decisions. Like, am I going to fight and save my life, or am I going to flee, run for my life, right? And the freeze component is kind of like pre-fight or flight, where we're coming into shutting down the distracted, higher level thinking and just going to those basic instinct decisions. And we sort of freeze in a capacity to say either I'm going to spring out and fight or I'm going to hide and flee. And so freeze serves a purpose too. But if our lives aren't actually threatened, if it's something kind of like 2 steps removed from our survival, like the sales, help my paycheck, which helped me go to the grocery store, still survival's attached, but it's not imminent. And so we get into that fight or flight place, and then we need to figure out tools to cycle out of it. And knowing that our emotions are triggered and that there's information there is the first step to getting a handle on a situation like that.
You mentioned a key
that
word.
That was a lot, cool. Right?
No, that was great, but it led me to,
yeah.
Leadership can be emotionally taxing. No one will argue that. And you just talked about tools. What are some tools or insights from your book that leaders can use to help manage that stress, that need to take flight when things get overwhelming, or either they're just simply burnt out?
Gosh, yeah, burnout is a big one, right? That's when we've really been ignoring all these signs of fight or flight and just kind of trying to act as if, which, can be a healthy kind of response. We need to sort of act as if to be in decorum, but it's okay to acknowledge that we have feelings. So some tools, the really basic tools that the book shares are the tool of self-awareness. And that is a key component that is in a framework that I use as a communications coach, which I call the 3 keys to communication. And it's really soft skill sets that we also bring to the workplace. So I call the 3 keys, I dub them self-honesty, relational honesty, and universal honesty. And what these really reference, Deneen, are the soft skills of self-awareness. And then in relational honesty, it's empathy, first for ourselves and then for others. And then in universal honesty, it's about that soft skill of accountability. How am I being self-aware and bringing empathy to the situation in all of my communiques?
Okay, you cannot just throw that out there only once. I'm going to need you to back up and share that again because that's impactful, and I want to make sure my listeners get it.
Yeah, write it down if you need to or want to, right? Or just record this piece. The 3 keys to communication are our framework for communicating with each other responsibly in a civilized society or in a workplace environment. And they really are, I say, self-honesty, relational honesty, and universal honesty. The honesty part is about being authentic, right? But the soft skills that each of these reference are being self-aware, having empathy for ourselves and others has to start with us first, and then being accountable to using those first 2 tools in all of our communiques.
You know you had me when you started to talking about self-awareness, because that is one of the key components of a lot of the work that Jenny and I do when it comes to the book.
Yeah.
And people don't understand is that the first person who you learn to lead is yourself, and the way that you lead yourself effectively is becoming more self-aware. And the more self-aware you are, you're able to identify perhaps your triggers, the things that draw you near to people, and it makes you a better individual. Also, when you're more self-aware, I think you're more equipped to express empathy.
Yeah, I think so too, right? Because we have to feel safe in our environments in order to be our best selves. Otherwise, we're in that at least low-level state of fight or flight, right? Where in fight or flight, our brains do us a service, right? They shut down that high-level thinking that could be distracting. I always use the same analogy of, like, if I'm about to fight a tiger to the death, I don't want to stop and think about how they're going to cook this tiger later, right? Like, that's going to make me tiger food, right? So that needs to get off my plate and not even be an option for my easily distracted brain. So, you know, we have to have that ability to kind of shut down when we're really in survival mode. But our brains also give us lots of practice fight or flight, where our lives aren't actually threatened, but our brains remember how to send out that neurochemistry. And we have evolved enough that we don't need to stay stuck in fight or flight and fight each other all the time.
I think one of the key things to helping us not to be stuck in one of those two modes is to set boundaries. And I know that your book has some great information on how to set boundaries for emotional well-being. Would you please share some of the tips that you would give our listeners on setting healthy boundaries for themselves while maintaining their effectiveness?
I love that. So, interestingly enough, there is an actual page, a whole entry on boundaries, because you're right, it's integral, right, to being able to understand our feelings and to use them in a healthy way that's functional. And so not only is there this one page on boundaries, it's actually 2 pages, this entry, but there are 7 other entries in the book. And if you go to the index, you'll find all of those and learn so much about boundaries. But I think what I'd like to do, if you're okay with it, is just read the centering thought from the bottom of the boundaries entry, because it kind of just takes all of the pieces about our relationship with boundaries and the purpose of them and gives us a moment to kind of contemplate from a mindful perspective of being like observational and non-attached, so like curious but critical. Are you okay with that?
Of course I am. Go ahead.
Okay. So this is a centering thought on boundaries. What do boundaries look like to me? I can examine my relationship with boundaries by simply imagining a boundary of any kind and paying attention to how I react in my body, moods, or thoughts. I can practice saying no and pay attention to the outcome to learn more. It's really simple, right? And the centering thought kind of in each of the entries takes sort of just some main ideas to get us a little bit out of the fight or flight of the emotion we might be feeling and into that sort of more resourced brain space of, I'm allowed to access higher level thinking and get a little contemplative about this moment. And I think that when we use our boundaries, that there's a reference to a guided meditation where you imagine a wall around yourself wherever you are, and then you get to change the material of the wall or build a door or shrink it or raise it or add a roof, right? And you get to kind of create that emotional and visible but make it visual kind of boundary. And so the centering thought sort of comes from that sort of same mindset or landscape of like, my boundaries are mine and they can be fluid how I choose for them to be.
I like that. My boundaries are mine and they can be fluid how I choose them to be. I think sometimes when we hear the word boundary, we think confinement. I personally believe that boundaries are the most freeing thing that you can establish. And they're also key because people take notice of the way you treat yourself, and then they respond accordingly.
Yes. I mean, we've heard that phrase of how we teach other people how to treat us, right? And it comes from how we treat ourselves. Yeah.
Now, I have to ask, because in your book you talk about the warmth of the sunlight and its symbolic role in emotional healing. I have to know more. And can you tell our listeners how they can intentionally create moments of joy or renewal in their daily lives?
Yeah. I love that. I love how you're equating the warmth of the sunlight with like joy and renewal, right? Because that is what sunshine does for us. There is also an entry on sunlight, and it's about those kind of metaphoric things that we attach to it, but also about the reality of the vitamin D that we need through our skin and our eyelids, right, to kind of help our brains, grow and be like as healthy as they possibly can be. So, not only do we need this sort of metaphoric, kind of allegorical sunshine and the candle of hope in the dark days of winter, right? But we also need the actual real sunshine. When it comes to joy, I will say that I believe deep joy comes through self-acceptance, and that comes through self-awareness. So any of the places that you want to step into a book like My Moody Day book and get a little bit more self-awareness about your own relationship to your feelings is going to, by necessity, bring you joy.
I'm just rethinking about what you just said. Being comfortable in who you are is a must in order for you to express joy. Because if you imagine a person who is very unhappy with themselves, they're always trying to change. And I don't mean people that are trying to just improve their lives, but nothing is ever right in their life when it comes to them, the way they view themselves. It shows up in how they present themselves to the world.
That's right, yeah. And, go ahead.
I was going to say, and it doesn't show up as joy and sunshine.
Right.
It shows up as a sickly, unhappy person.
Yeah, and and then for the predators out there, you show up as someone who could be easily manipulated. Like you're lacking joy, I'll make you feel that there's joy, but really, there's not here. Yeah. And if we have the real joy and the self-acceptance that we've been talking about, then we can kind of see through that, and then we can set our own healthy boundaries. It's all hand in hand, isn't it?
It truly is, but I think sometimes we try to separate the two, or either we buy into that I'm going to fake it until I make it mentality. Yeah. That only works for certain things for short periods of time, and your emotional well-being is not one of them.
Right. Oh, agreed. 100%.
When we talk about emotional intelligence, can you just give us a practical exercise that leaders can use to strengthen this skill in their lives?
Okay, yes. And a lot of people are going to roll their eyes and not want to do this one, I think, because it's that basic one. I'm actually going to give you two, okay? But the first one, I think people are going to go, oh, and have resistance to. Perhaps not. I don't want to do your listeners a disservice, but it's that simple task of breathing. And I think it gets mocked a lot, which is understandable. We're always breathing or else we're not alive. But when we're in stress, we are typically holding our breath. We hold our breaths as part of fight or flight. It's a natural physiological response that comes hand in hand with fight or flight. Fight or flight affects these three areas of our being: our bodies, our moods, and our thoughts. And in our bodies, we will hold our breath. We will get small, either, again, to spring out and attack or to, hide or run and flee. And so we will find ourselves clenching our teeth, balling up our fists, getting a tightness in our tummies, holding our breath. And the more we do that, the more tenseness and stress we have, and the more we're sending out that duress signal and having that kind of physiological response, the more we create like a feedback loop of stress, right? We're not getting resourceful and cycling out of it. And it becomes a standard way of operating. So going to the breath is a wonderful service to our body, to remember to unclench, to relax our jaws, to take a deep, full breath. It's a big drink of oxygen, and it sends out amazing signals to our brain, to our central nervous system, to our heart, can slow our heart rate. It cuts through that stress that's been sent out and helps us to heal and get resourceful again. Again, it sends that signal to the brain that says the worst is over, I can put my thinking back online, and I can make a good decision that's beyond these two. So that's wonderful right there. I would say breathing, deep breathing, intentional breathing is a really easy, helpful, immediate tool we can all do when we notice that we're stressed. So the second tool I want to share is what I call the BMT. Yeah, go ahead.
Before you go to number 2, I have to jump in, because when you were talking about the clenching of your jaw, I experience that sometimes, and that's how I catch myself. I was like, oh my goodness, why does my face hurt? And I start to take notice, and it's because my jaws are clenched. And sometimes it can be that I am so stressed out about a situation or a project that I'm working on, and I think I'm handling it well, but when I take inventory of my physical cues, I realize the clenched jaw and the breathing that is not correct. And I've heard that we all breathe, many of us breathe incorrectly. We only breathe from like the top part of our diaphragm.
Right, our diaphragm,
So when you were talking about that, it resonated with me, and it's also gave me the opportunity to say I need to make a mental note to be more engaged in what my physical body is trying to tell me in those situations, and how do I respond once I've noticed it.
Yeah, because that's actually the next tool. It's exactly that, Deneen. It's taking that inventory. I call this tool the BMT index, and it is a very simple check-in with ourselves. It's just asking yourself 3 questions. What does my body feel? What are my moods? And what are my thoughts? And so that's the BMT. And it's like BMI index, right? But it's the T instead of the I. It's missing the bottom serif. And it's, right, that's an easy way to remember it. My thanks to my local colleague, Jane Lump, who helped me kind of brand that. I came up with this easy little check-in, because it really is. It's a check-in that goes more than just into like our body mass index. It goes into what am I feeling physically and emotionally, and what am I thinking? And those are the 3 parts, as we already said, to fight or flight. So it's this quick self-awareness. We don't have to attach a homework assignment to that, right? It's just noticing what I'm noticing. And maybe I don't know yet how to differentiate between my body sensations and my moods. Maybe when I check in with my body, I say, I'm feeling happy, which I would say if I were coaching somebody, okay, that's a mood. What does happiness feel like to you physically? Where are you feeling it? And maybe it's like lightness in my upper body. Maybe it's a warm sensation in my chest, right? Maybe it's noticing that I'm smiling. So these can be some physical sensations. Maybe we're not able to notice our physical sensations at all because we've been trained as athletes to ignore our body messages. That's a really common thing I see with people. And the point is, it's all okay. It's just starting to get a better handle on our personal relationship with what we're feeling moment to moment.
In the short period of time that we've been together, you have downloaded so much valuable information that I know my listeners are going to want to get their copy of My Moody Daybook. Tell our listeners where they can find that.
Yes, that's actually available at Amazon. It's at Barnes & Noble, so bn.com. There are ebook versions, paperback, hardback, whatever you like to read the most. And it's also available directly online at Balboa Press. And again, it's called My Moody Daybook. And Daybook I just put together as one word because it is that daily devotional that gives you an opportunity to kind of sit down and use it as a field guide to your human feelings.
I want to invite you back again so that we can further discuss your book and how it's impacting those that are actually reading it and using it, because I know that you're going to have some wonderful reviews and feedback when people start to using this resource.
Thank you, Deneen. I would love to come back and do that. And I thank you to all of your listeners as well who begin to get that self-awareness.
Listeners, thanks so much for joining us today. Remember, you can learn more about how to strengthen your leadership skills and develop your team at AtartLeadershipAcademy.com.